So without further ado, I'll pass the virtual mic over to my colleague, Groom.
Thank you, Naya. Welcome to the Work Center's virtual series. I'm Groom. Thank you for joining us. Tonight, we are excited to celebrate the Boston Poet Laureate program with the current Poet Laureate and summer program faculty, Porsha Olayiwola, and featuring the debut Youth Poet Laureate, Alondra Bobadilla, and Youth Poet Laureate finalists and ambassadors, Tariq, Charles, and Norah Brady. So welcome. Due to the pandemic, we had to postpone to next summer the Work Center's week-long interdisciplinary social justice week dedicated to social activism and radical art making. All of our presenters here tonight had planned to join us for this week. So while we look forward to being together next summer, we are very lucky to have these poets with us tonight in celebration of the Boston Poet Laureate program. Porsha Olayiwola is a writer, performer, educator, and curator who uses Afrofuturism and Surrealism to examine historical and current issues in the Black, woman, and queer diasporas. She is an individual World Poetry Slam champion and the artistic director at MassLEAP, a literary youth organization. Olayiwola is an MFA candidate at Emerson College, and she is the author of I Shimmer Sometimes, and is the current Poet Laureate for the city of Boston. Born and raised in Boston for most of her life, Alondra Bobadilla found and nurtured her love for writing since she first learned her letters. Besides writing, she has participated in multiple performance art forms since she was a little girl, finding ways to express herself beyond poetry alone. She is a student at Fenway High School and was named Boston's first ever Youth Poet Laureate in January 2020. Norah Brady is an 18-year-old poet obsessed with the moon. That's my favorite line in any bio I've ever read. Her poetry and short fiction can be found in Rookie Magazine, the Ekphrastic Review, the Blue Marble Review, and the collection Writers on Earth, New Visions for Our Planet. She's attending Bryn Mawr College in the fall, where she will be studying anthropology and creative writing. Tariq Charles is an 18-year-old poet and is studying at the John D. O'Brien School of Mathematics and Science. He's been writing poetry since the age of 12. He's also an avid fan of rap music and hip hop and is just starting out in Boston's music scene. This partnership was made possible with the Boston Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture by Tom Johnston, who we are also very lucky to have with us tonight. Tom Johnston is a program director and event producer in the City of Boston's Mayor's Office of Arts and Culture. In this role, he manages the Poet Laureate and Youth Poet Laureate programs. So Tom, over to you.
Hi, Kelly. Thanks for having us all. The City Poet Laureate's goal, or one of its goals, is to raise the status of poetry in the everyday consciousness of Bostonians. And I would say, if that is the first goal, Porsha and Alondra, they have done that in such new and unusual ways, which, I'm learning so much about that from them. A little bit about the Youth Poet Laureate program is, we started the Youth Poet Laureate program in 2019, or we started the search, and Alondra was named Youth Poet Laureate in January of this year. And what a year it's been. Already, the requests have been, incredible. And she's done events, the demand on top of what the normal demand would be because of where we are in history have just have multiplied. And, there's a lot more to come. It's been a really singular role. And Porsha, I'm looking at my notes, sorry. Porsha was just named a Mellon Foundation Poet Laureate Fellow. And let me see, and with the Fine Art Work Center, Kelle and I have been trying to find different ways of collaborating. I love the Fine Art Work Center. The Fine Art Work Center, for, in my mind, is, they're lifelong collaborators with the artists that go there. And it's just, so supportive. So many of my favorite writers, have started and done their great work there. And when Kelle suggested that she'd be willing to do the Social Justice Week, I was really over the moon, because it seemed like she's setting up these young writers for a lifelong practice. And, so I can't be more thrilled for this collaboration. We're disappointed when it couldn't happen. The workshop couldn't happen this year, but I'm glad that it's still going to happen. And I'll turn it over to Porsha. Thanks.
Hi there, everybody. I'm very excited to be here. I will keep it brief because all of the introductions have been very elaborate. And what more can I say? But I'll start by introducing Alondra, our city's first youth poet laureate. I've had the pleasure to interview Alondra, to read the application before I met her in person, and I was really just blown away. I think the thing that stood out about Alondra's interview is really just her blatant love for the city. I think I care really strongly about good poets, and I love good poets, but even more so, I love good people, and people who do poets work through not only literature, but through civic engagement. And I think Alondra just really blew us all out of the water. And I've been incredibly humbled to work with her. I said this is gonna be short, so I'm just gonna turn it over to an amazing poet who inspires me. Show some love for Alondra.
Hi. So my name is Alondra, and I'm just going to be reading a poem for you guys today. It doesn't have a title, but I wrote it in July 20th, at 1:46 p.m. of this year. That's something that's typical, side note, that's something that's typical of a lot of my poems. I don't tend to title them for no other reason besides I don't know how to sum things up. So there's that, but I hope you all enjoy. The ghost of my memories reminds me of a love I only remember to feel on train rides. That bumpy, banshee screeching of terror that reminds me I'm home. Nostalgia only pays its visit when Jackson Square is in full view. Nothing special about the cracked wooden benches labeled with stories only the owners know to tell, but I'd piece them name by name, carving by carving, till I created a tall tale of my own, made of stranger markings other people just call vandalism. But I am quick to romanticize the ordinary, because how lovely is youth, that they engrave their high school sweethearts' names into sidewalks and glass, leaving traces of their lives behind for all to see. I wonder, they hope to return to these places, perhaps on accident, or re-stumble into innocent recklessness, their inner child leading them to this place of purpose, a burial ground, or maybe a less glorious monument than most, but lilies and orchids belong here too. There's only seconds before the train zooms by, but the zip line of bad decisions is only 2 staircase flights above me. I could just go a short climb to remaking old laughs and covering mental photographs with my tears, a kid sitting on cement, biting cheeks to restrain tantrums from spilling over. I never wanted to leave this place, but time said we had to go. But somewhere in my mind, I hold fast to a fantasy that these old friends of mine will arrive, sit beside me on the ground and weep, weep for the death of things we strangled. I can feel your ghoul hand steady my shoulders. I can feel your voice linger, your laughter, its boom. I've never had you this close for a very long time, but your heart has always been in this space, right in the center of my palms. Your ghost plasma drooping through my fingers, drip dropping to the ground, waiting as I am for your return to come collect what you left with me. I love you is a strong phrase I'd be willing to repeat to you 1,000 ways if you only showed up in more than just my dreams. Shine your moonlight face on my sun and eclipse our destinies with love. I leave a make-believe bouquet at the exit of the train. I'd shower this place with flowers for days, decorating it with the finest treasures and my best pictures, hoping they'd last for generations. I want the old and the young to step on these grounds, hearing our joy and pain in the same frequencies. And I hope they leave flowers here for themselves too. But I guess leaving markings on cracked wooden benches will just have to do. Thank you.
I'm like screaming right now. But we are virtual, so, you know, I have to figure out the aesthetics around public performance and, I guess, haggling or something. I don't know. So I'm going to introduce the next poet, and then I'm going to get out of your virtual hairs. But next up, is Tariq Charles. I've had the chance to engage with Tariq on numerous of interactions. The first obviously being the application. I think another memorable moment was Tariq's interview when he came in and was just completely a person, a whole person. I think it was one of our last interviews of the day. And we had worked with quite a few young people throughout the day. And I think Tariq just reminded us holistically what it means to occupy your full self in any given space. I think that he is absolutely unbelievable, a completely magical human being, a wordsmith outside of this world, right? He really works with words, and an incredible leader when it comes to his poetry community at John D. O'Brien. And I think we're all lucky to hear Tariq right now. So show some love, some virtual snaps and hugs for Tariq.
Hello. Thank you. That was such a good introduction. I'm gonna read this off my notes. It's a poem that it means a lot to me. The title's kind of funny because it's called Rappers Be Sad Too, but I'm not really a rapper. That scratch everything I said about that. But it's just about me dealing with substance abuse and substances that I were prescribed. So yeah. Orange canister, white top, child lock, 1 pill, eye pop. 10 milligrams my dosage, omitted weed stood as my aroma, stitched inside of my clothing, rolled up inside of a moment. Lexapro my daily notion, oceans flow like waves turn, so does my emotion. This just a downswing. When you're trotting in the hood, this a commonly found thing. Riding on my mental, exporting seeds from my weed. This isn't incidental, everything a bound trade. Missed payments with stress, we blessed the chicken still made. In the case of my story, horror almost beat the glory. At times I still shine somehow, some way I'm alive. Before I had antis prescribed in the order for depressive disorders to not arrive. Oxycontin, painkiller, Tylenol, let's take a ride. Sprinkling some Benadryl rubs in my inside. Big boy was dropping weight like you run and drop a dime. While it's still slim, we'll get back to it another time. Bright white lights, hospital dreaming. In and outdoors, my core being was still sleeping. Can't find a reason. Months after, hard to shed tears because I had peers as a factor. Staying strong was my persona dawn. At night, I cried in chapters, handwritten, scribbled, remastered. I lied to faces, say I'd be okay. I play the games and dip. This is me tripping over me. Excuse me. This is me tripping over me. This is just a downswing. But in this life, that's not the only thing. This is just a downswing. But in this life, that's not the only thing. This just a downswing, but in this life, it's not the only thing. I hear the alarm, I wake up, another day passed. Wait till I ain't take my pill yet. Wait till I ain't take my pill yet. I'm sorry. Wait, I ain't take my pill yet. Orange canister, white top, child lock, 1 pill, I pop, 10 milligrams my dosage, omitted weed stood as my aroma, stitched inside of my clothing, rolled up the side of a moment. That was really bad, but thank you. Yeah, yikes.
That was great. We love you so much. We love you so much. And I hope you turn that camera back on and show off that face and that album cover, or my bad, mixtape cover, you know. But that was Tariq, y'all. We're gonna move right into the next poet who I have the pleasure of introducing, who is Norah. Norah also came into the interview. And I should tell you all, when we were interviewing for the Boston Youth Poet Laureate, we didn't know what the process was gonna be exactly, but we ended up having these young people, you know, dressed in their finest suits, come all the way to City Hall and walk into a room with, you know, 10 leaders of poetry and youth programming in the city, which I can imagine is pretty intimidating, or I know for a fact is pretty intimidating, but all of these folks held their own, and the same is true for Norah, who just entered with such grace, style, poise, that really kind of honed it in for us. She was called by our judges to most likely to be the first poet to write a poem on the moon, and I'm just gonna introduce her by reading this line from her application for one of her poems, and it goes, I am in a cathedral far away, which is to say, the only magic that exists. Show some love for Norah, y'all. Show some love for Norah.
Hello, that was such a generous introduction. I am going to read a poem that I wrote in Alondra's workshop, because I thought that that would be a nice way to kind of make this kind of whole circle situation with this program. It's not the kind of poem I write usually, or I guess it's maybe the kind of poem I want to write more usually, but it's after a poet, Gabriel Ramirez, I believe, who we listened to a poem from, so it's called On Realizing I Am American. 1. When I board a bus on foreign soil, they have been taught my tongue in classrooms. I do not touch a dictionary once. 2. And we tell them we're from Canada because Canada isn't on the news nearly as much, or because, like all animals, we fear retribution. 3. Look, you don't choose the big rock you're born on or when. Since Pangea ceased to exist, things have pretty much been going to shit. Any of the microbial ocean spit, the primordial ooze snacking off deep sea chimneys could tell you that. This country, hypocrite, changeable and unflinching both, has written its own history too many times to count. Babble, a cacophony banned in most places of education, sifted, false gold. 4. They carve men into mountains and don't mention the wars unless it suits them. 5. I have wanted to leave. 6. But America, one of many lumbering, slowly dying things, like all dying things, has weeds poking out of the sidewalk. 7. I sit with the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance, these functions of a dream I was told to believe in. That love should be given to the land before you know who pretends to be its stewards. 8. Loyalty, the idea that block parties and fireworks have no cost. 6. Rampart standing. I am sitting on my friend's roof, chalky black, no railing. The buildings gleam like rivers. The bombs made red and blue fill my chest like breathing. 10. This country does not love me or anyone. This country is land. My country is as breakable as any stretch of dirt, as gullible as any prophecies charted by our worst natures. I will live on this land, this country, perhaps die here, become the primordial ooze every politician, poet, and president will eventually become. But before I go, I will know my neighbors, sift through the days with them to find something worth saving, name the things that haunt us, watch the children grow like meadows. Thank you.
Thank you. I feel incredibly honored. And I guess it's my turn. So I'm going to read a poem, and then I'm going to we're going to have a conversation or a discussion. I have some questions for the Youth Poet Laureate, as well as the finalists, and we'll just have a chance to chat. This poem I'm reading was written this summer during Pride Month, and if people recall, Pride Month it's been a very just intense time, right? On realizing I'm American, right? As an African American, as a queer American, as a person who is surviving COVID American, right? Like the complexities of identity on this terrain right now is just overly intense. And this poem really came at the intersection of that. And you know, it moves through this idea or this event that I got a chance to work with Netflix this summer, and they were doing a Pride special. Excuse me, that is my mother. That's always my mother. But they were doing a Pride special and asked me what it meant to have a Pride event as a Black queer woman. So the poem is about that. It's called Netflix Calls to Ask What Pride Looks Like for a Black Queer Woman. And I join in on the joke. I tell them a flag walks into a parade and realizes it's forgotten some of its color. So the vanguard adds black and brown stripes, paints blue, pink, and white in its corners. The funny part, there is no punchline. Haven't you heard the story science tells us about the rainbow? If you mix all the colors refracting light, the result is a pure white, a pearly milk, an ivory tower glittering the procession. What color is the flag then? Which shade sits pretty up top the float? Black and brown people and trans women had to be edited into a movement they started. Afterthought to their labor, marginalized while marching. Isn't it gut busting? How white supremacy works, how it absorbs all color. Isn't it ironic? When the colors bleed together, white shines through. How it never ceases to surrender. Netflix asks what pride means for a Black dyke in today's world. And I wonder if they've seen the news feeds lined with Black bodies. I wonder what they think to see the streets filled with protesters, protesting the protesters. Pride is a parody, refuses to join the fight against police brutality, even though the first parade was rebellion. Don't acknowledge legacy, even though Stonewall was a rimmed cocktail lunged at the cops. Netflix calls me with a knee slapper, a tearjerker, a death drop of a joke. I tell them to invite all the corporations, fasten the rainbow into $, build a buck off this blood, call up Adidas, your grandma, the liberals, the queers new to the block and the cookout too. Bring in the news channels to gape at the Black and the queer surviving, to marvel at the undead and me. James Brown proud, Janelle Monáe pride. Netflix calls to ask about the future, and my mouth wisecracks a riddle. Haven't you heard the parable science tells us about the color Black? How it exists before all the other colors show up, how it lingers long after they leave, how dangerous. My dark humor still refracting light, the most mischievous joke around. Been here before the shine, gonna be here after the sun fades the flag into memory. Isn't it funny? Me alive and beginning. Ooh, that was a mouthful. That was a mouthful. Okay, that's that poem. And then I guess we'll open it up for Q&A. Is that true? Yes.
Yeah, we can open it up for Q&A, or if you'd like to have a conversation first, whatever you.
I mean, this is great. This is kind of my first chance getting, you know, all of the folks who were in some shape, form, or fashion a part of that program in a room together again outside of that public reading. So I'm just really curious, how was the application process? What was that like? What was the interview like? And how has it, you know, impacted your life, if at all, right? That's my first question. And I mean, I would love to hear from everybody, but whoever wants to answer first.
I can go. I found it really exciting. Like there was something like, I don't know, I hadn't known a lot about Boston, the Boston arts like situation, like what programs there were, and I actually I like applied on the day it was due because someone had like my 8th grade English teacher called out in the halls. He was like, Norah, you have to apply for this. And I was like, what is it? And then I did it during English class. And I think that like he was like the person who like really appreciated my poetry the most of the people in my school, teachers that I had. So it was another kind of fun full circle moment where I got to like participate in this citywide like thing, and it was super cool. It was also really like, it was intimidating to meet all of these Boston like arts people, but then also I got to just see all of these Boston arts people. Very cool, very intimidating, but that they exist and that they're out there was, you know, new information for me. So I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
I agree with Nora's sentiment about the intimidation, because as well as about not knowing too much about the Boston art scene, because that's how I felt myself. And it's not because I didn't want to know, it's because there was just no access. Like there was no access, at least in, you know, from my personal experience. The application, I think I did mine, I don't remember, I know I didn't do it too late, I know I didn't do it too early. But I remember that I had a couple of different people, you know, come up to me and express that they wanted me to try applying. And at that point, I was very wary because I was like, I don't know if this is something I want to do. I was very nervous about putting myself out there. There was just a lot going on, you know, in my life and within myself. And I just didn't know if putting myself out there in any situation was a good option. But I decided, why not? And I went ahead, and that was mostly because my friend, you know, pushed me to it, and she said she was never going to forgive me, and her dramatics, you know, were like, okay, fine, like I'll do it. And yeah, being in that room, the interview was like super scary because I was just like, it was raining that day, and I was so afraid because I thought I was gonna fall because like of the shoes I had on, and I felt like I was talking too fast. Like I was mentally scrutinizing everything that I was saying and doing because I was like, that sounded, why'd you do that? Why you do, you know what I mean? And it was intimidating. But and to be completely honest, you know, it was kind of funny because the interviewers themselves, like you guys did not lighten up the intimidation. Like you guys just were very, you know what I mean? And it wasn't purposeful, but they just have a presence. And it's not because they did anything. No, they're just very intense people. So then that was also very intense for me. But it's an experience I'll never forget for multiple different reasons.
I can still remember sitting down in a room and looking at everybody in the room and just being like, wow, this is for real. I didn't expect to get like this far at all. Like I didn't even expect to even get this far. So me just reading like my poetry to everybody was really humbling, and just, you know, like it just put a lot of things into perspective that I was even able to be in around this community of people. My sister was a poet way before me. She was like more in touch with the scene, probably more is right now than I ever will be. But yeah, like that was my only connection to it. But if it wasn't for her encouraging me or even just starting me out in poetry, like she's the person that gave me my foundation, I wouldn't have been here without Canella. So I don't know, it's just really humbling and I'm grateful to be here. I'm sorry, I know this is a bit much, but I wanted to read my poem over again because I really feel like I butchered it. Is that okay?
Actually, why don't you just do that right now? And then I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Orange canister, white top.
You're not gonna turn your camera on?
I didn't know my camera was off. It's just in my notes.
Look us in the eye. We want to see you.
Okay. I don't know if like my camera's gonna stay on.
Okay. Don't worry about it. We're listening.
I'm sorry. Orange canister, white top, child lock, 1 pill, I pop. 10 milligrams my dosage, omitted weed stood as my aroma, stitched inside of my clothing, rolled up inside of a moment. Lexapro, my daily notion. Oceans like the waves turns, so does my emotion. This just a downswing. When you're tried in the hood, it's a commonly found thing. Rotting on my mental, exporting seeds from my weed. This isn't incidental, everything abound trade. Missed payments with the stress, we bless the chicken is still made. In the case of my story, horror almost beat the glory. At times I still shine some way, somehow I'm alive. Before I had antis prescribed in order for depressive disorders to not arrive. Oxycontin, painkiller, Tylenol, let's take a ride. Sprinkling some Benadryl, rupture my insides. Big boy was dropping weight like you run and drop a dime. While it's still slim, I'll get back to it another time. Bright white lights, hospital dreaming. In and outdoors, my core being was sleeping. Can't find a reason. Months after, hard to shed tears because I had peers as a factor. Staying strong was my persona dawn. At night, I cried in chapters, handwritten, scribed, remastered. I lied to faces, say I'll be okay. I played the games and dipped. This is me tripping over me. This is just a downswing. But in life, that's not the only thing. I hear the alarm, I wake up. Another day passed. I wait until I pop my pill so I can get past my day. Orange canister, white top, child lock, 1 pill, I pop. 10 milligrams my dosage, omitted weed stood as my aroma, stitched inside of my clothing, rolled up inside of a moment. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. Do a deep breath. Thank you for doing that over, Tariq. Thank you for demanding that of yourself, right? Like that's clearly why you're here. And I think about, what it means to really be a worker for the craft, right? Like really thinking about our impact and how much heart and hard work that we put into our craft. So thank you for like being an example of that. I'm gonna ask another question. And I suppose I had 2 questions and one for each of you individually because I really am that nosy. But I'm afraid we'll run out of time. So I'll ask the one that's really burning. And then Tariq, you can answer it first, or if anybody else wants to jump in first. But I'm curious, I identify as an Afrofuturist, right? Or a futurist. And I'm like, constant, like the state of the world right now is my genre. That's, what I'm reading about. That's what I'm studying. That's what I write about. And I'm just curious, also as a futurist, I literally believe young people are the future, right? That's just it. That's the reality that we're existing in. So I'm curious, my own personal nosiness. I want to know, what do you guys think this world needs right now? Or like, how do we fix this world? If you had to pick one thing or one word, how do we fix this world? And why? Or, but if anybody wants to answer that, I know that's huge. Feel free.
For me, personally, I see a lot of this stuff on the news, especially with people that look like me and in similar positions like me dying at the hands of the police. I know people that die because of other people that just live close to them. So I don't know how to feel about it, but I know for me, trying to like resolve how I feel about all these things, it feels like I'm being compressed, and it's really dark. I don't know how else to put it. It's just a really dark feeling around me. So whenever I feel like that, whenever I write, I try to go within myself and find forgiveness for those people that do those things. And I don't even know them personally, so I can't even judge them or their circumstances. But, you know, I feel like I can see hate when I see it, and I can see when like hate starts to emit hate within myself. And that's when I tend to like draw back and look for forgiveness. Cause I feel like that's really only thing I can do just so I can get through my days. Cause at the end of the day, it's just you out here.
Thank you. If Norah or Alondra want to jump in on that.
Yeah, I have like something kind of similar, like just the way that we view, like the way that this country is built. It's a lot of things. It's a lot of interconnecting systems that have made it the way that it is. But I think a lot of it is like this punishment mindset, this way that we view people that is not in a community building or like just a way to create connections and, you know, actually try to make change. Instead, it's we're going to punish, and we have this carceral mindset for everyone and everything. And I think that's a big thing that we need to change. And, you know, we need to change it in the systems and the law, but I think it's also a mindset that we have to change for everyone. And it does involve like forgiveness, because that's a very important thing that we have to like work in ourselves.
I feel like fixing is such a big concept. And I think that means very unique things to different people, because I think my personal idea of what can fix our situation is very different from all of you and everyone out there. And everyone just has a very personal, I wouldn't want to say the word agenda necessarily, but just, you know, morale and ideology as to what they think could fix our situation. But I think to answer this question in a more general way, as time passes, I feel like the answer to this question, because I think about this a lot, I feel like more than I should be, there has to be personal change, and this is a little bit of my personal belief, but also just seeing things being put into practice within our communities. There has to be a personal shift for there to be a community shift. Because the thing is, and I'm not saying, you know, change all of your ideological views and let's all think the same way. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is people that are willing to respect everyone's ideological views, but that has to come from an internal respect. That then will translate into an institutional and systematic respect. Because I think what people forget is it's people that run these systems and create these systems. These systems do not create themselves. So even when we talk about the system, what are we talking about? You know, you cannot, it's very easy to try to separate the people from the system. So even when we talk about police brutality, I have people who work in the police force, but I know that there are good people working in a bad system, and that automatically makes it will intoxicate you over time. And that's just with everything. It doesn't matter how good you might be, if you are in a situation that is poisonous, you will eventually consume that poison, whether you like it or not, whether you notice it or not. And that isn't necessarily on you, but it's on us. It's on all of us. It's on the collective, because that says a lot about how we are handling ourselves as people, as individuals, and how we're handling each other. So I really just think it starts off with a lot of multiple different personal shifts, and then a lot of different family shifts, how we think about family. I think we've lost a lot of family values, and then translate that into community in our institutions. I think we're trying to start the wrong way. And yes, it's hard to start person to person. It's hard to start family to family, but it's just changing laws and changing institutions. We can see that people, if you change something and they don't like it, And because we have our right to freedom of speech, we will rebel against that, and that will just aggravate the situation. So that's sort of what I think. I think there has to be some personal changes, and it has to go step by step for there to be real, lasting, effective change in our country.
Wow, thank you. Thank you all, honestly. Yeah, I'm just listening to all of that and like receiving it. We had one question come in from an audience member, which was, can you define Afrofuturism? And I'll just define it best I can, but I think it's important to know there are also other futurisms, right? I just taught this very week-long class about this, but there are so many different futurisms. Afrofuturism specifically is about using magical realism, sci-fi, fantasy to critique and evaluate issues within the Black diaspora. The African-American, not African-American, but the Black diaspora, the African diaspora. One word I think a lot about is counter-memory, but it's a genre that offers a counter-memory or counter-narrative to the dominant narrative or the dominant memory, and uses, it uses magic to do so, but also that could just be the counter aspect, i.e. Toni Morrison's Beloved. It tells the story of the runaway slave, Margaret Garner, but it tells this altered version of it, this counter version of it, and uses this surrealism to do so. But that's it. It helps me map the future. It helps me map the world I want to see, to shape the world I want to see. Some people say the Declaration of Independence was a type of futurism, and that people came in a room and they dreamed of what they wanted the world to look like, right? So I use it for that aspect, for shaping the world and for shaping my language and etc. I know we're running out of time. I'm going to ask one more question. I'm going to ask Alondra. I hear that you are working on a book. I'm interested in knowing what that process is like, how that's been, what the book is going to be about, or what's it been like to be the laureate, whichever one you would like to answer.
I'll
All just wanting to
I'll dip my toes in both questions. Oh my goodness, I wonder what bird told you this. Okay, so I'm dipping my toes in both questions. Yeah, that's what I meant to say. Okay, so the first thing is, I'll just talk about the writing process, or just the book writing process. I don't know what it would have, I just think the whole world would have looked very different if it were not for the coronavirus. Maybe I'm just assuming that certain things would be wildly different, but it would be wildly different, because I think I would be having a lot more in-person conversations about book things, and I'm not. And that's not necessarily a bad or a good thing, it's just a thing. I haven't really thought about whether it's good or bad, because I haven't experienced in-person writing thingies. So it is what it is. The process has been interesting. It's been interesting. It's been unique. I've always dreamed of writing a book since I was a kid. I know that was something I always wanted to do. I didn't know if I wanted to self-publish, or if I don't know what I wanted to do. But I knew that I had a lot of ideas, and I would often use this writing platform called Wattpad to like put books together. And that's as close that I'd ever got. So to be in a place now where I actually get to write and publish a book and have people read it and have people that is like, I'm still in awe about it. So oftentimes, like, I'll be writing, and as I'm putting the different things together and thinking about all the different concepts, because I don't want to spoil too much, I tend to just stop and think like, wow, like I'm actually doing this. Like, this is weird. This is kind of crazy. And then it's been a lot of different positive emotions that I haven't been able to like sit with, because I'm doing a lot every single day, but I just know that it's a lot of awe. And the second thing is, how does it feel to be the poet laureate? I think it's kind of the same. It's just a lot of awe. It's just a lot of shock. Like, I remember the first 2-3 interviews I did, I repeated myself. I was like, I am just in shock. And they just looked at me and they were like, and I was like, well, I don't know what else to tell you. That's how I'm feeling. I'm trying to be real here. So I think I've passed shock. I think I've been able to sink into the role and what it means. I just think it's interesting because there was no one before me. I have no one to look at. I only have Porsha, but that's the adult version. So it doesn't really, so it's just, there's a lot of looking at myself, and that's weird because, but I mean, I think if there's I don't know, I think if there's a concept, and this is also like a verse that I like reading a lot, it has to do with, you know, measure yourself with yourself. Like, don't measure yourself compared to other people. So it's almost kind of great that there was no one else, because I'm just measuring myself to myself. And I hope that whoever comes after me thinks the same way. Measure yourself to yourself, not to me, because I'm me and I'm doing whatever I'm doing in the role. But that does not mean that what you're going to do is better or less than or more, or it's just different. And I think that that's important to always keep in mind. So that's sort of been my experience.
I'm screaming again. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you all. Are there any more questions from audience, folks, before we get out of here? I don't know if Tariq or Norah or Alondra, you have questions for each other. If you have questions for me, if not, too nervous, you know.
To Norah and Alondra, what are your writing processes like?
All over the place. Absolutely all over the place. But I've been doing like in quarantine, I've been doing a lot more like online workshop stuff. And so I've been getting into like the whole idea of like free writing and then kind of finding a poem from that. Meditating before I write, which is kind of a wild thing, but I like the headspace it puts me in. I don't know. Sometimes I'm in the right place. Sometimes a poem just exits my body, and other times I have to pull it out. Like if there's a specific thing I want to write, but I can't quite find the words for it. But sometimes it shows up in another poem, and then I'm like, okay. The best thing for me currently is not to have a scarcity mindset, not to be like, I can only write about this specific thing now, or I have this idea, and so I'm going to save it up for when I'm ready to write about it. Like, no, just let it out. Just let it free. That's where I'm at.
Yeah. I secretly hate this question because it's like I don't have a process. There is no process. It's just whatever happens. So basically what, you know, everything that Norah said, ditto. Because it's just like I let exist what needs to exist, and what doesn't need to exist, it doesn't exist. Whatever. Like I just go with whatever feels right. And I do that because I can't do that with anything else in life. So I feel like structuring poetry for me is like, why would I pain myself in such a manner? That's like so horrible. That's going to take the joy out of just like being like on a bus and like telling my friends to shut up because I need to write. Like, you know how much joy I get? And then they actually stay quiet because like I'm in like a zone. And I kind of like when Norah said like meditating before writing a poem, and you trying that, because, you know, what I do is sometimes I'll pray before I have to write something. So I definitely get that, because there's something about prayer or meditation that puts you in just a very different place. So if there's something specific that you do need to write and you have a deadline, that's like a perfect thing to do, because it just completely disconnects you from everything else. And that is a positive, like consistent thing that I think a lot of people should add into their process, so to speak.
And what about you, Tariq, real quick? Your writing process.
I have to designate writing time for myself. I have to be like, all right, if I'm gonna write a poem, I'm really particular, like if I want to write it outside, inside, like what vibe I'm going for, where I'm affects the poem. If I'm rushing on a bus, I can't do that because I get anxious. Like if it's in class and I'm trying to write a poem on like the side of like my paper because I'm bored, it's, you know, like, yeah, it's a lot like what Norah said. It's really just fragmented whenever I get a chance, but most of the time I like to just designate like time so I can really focus myself and just get my energy right when I, you know, do it. Yeah.
We appreciate y'all. I feel like I just learned a lot. And I'm definitely gonna try this prayer meditation, because I'm kind of like Tariq in that I have to designate time to get the other anxieties out, right? I want to take some time to give it up for all of our panelists, as well as the folks at the Fine Arts Work Center out in P-Town. And I'm going to turn it over to them to close us out.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to hear your amazing work. And I so appreciate the insight into your creative process, into the work that you've done as Poet Laureate, the interview process, and all of it. It's, you know, it's the life of the poet, and you've led us into that, and I'm so appreciative. Thank you. And to hear your beautiful work was just the highlight. I did want to say East End Books here in Provincetown has copies of Porsha's poetry collection, I Shimmer Sometimes, in stock. So you can order that online at East End Books. They'll ship it nationally. If you're on the Outer Cape, they will hand deliver. So thank you. Before we go, I did want to just say to our panelists too, we have a little after party. You have an email in your inbox, so I don't want to lose you. But to all of our attendees, thank you so much for joining us.